The Virgin New Adventures can be summarised as more grittier, bleaker, and adult in its tones and political storytelling too, with very violent and sometimes quite unnerving depictions of physical violence, abuse, drugs, and even mental illness. The Virgin New Adventures had little filter in this department, but one book seems to fit the description of this more so than the others, especially the books prior to this one. This is Cat's Cradle, Warhead, who also incorporated his own trilogy of a cyberpunk dystopian arc in the form of the War trilogy, consisting of Warhead, Warlock, and Warchild. So what were my expectations of Cat's Cradle Warhead? Well, out of the three, it was the one I was looking forward to the most, especially since finishing Time's Crucible, which I still say is extremely convoluted, complicated, and it's definitely a headache to read, and I don't really want to read it again. So yeah, not great. But I was hopeful with Warhead, because I know what I like. I like dystopian novels. I like bleak undertones when it comes to writing, and this one has kind of like a political focus within its writing and throughout the War trilogy too. And I expected Witchmark perhaps to be the worst, which seems to be the way to go when it comes to reviews. But what about reviews for this one? It is frankly all over the place, and it's for two reasons really. The first reason is that most people say it doesn't feel like Doctor Who. It's probably the biggest complaint Warhead gets. And let me tell you this, if you dislike Warhead or Andrew Cartmel's books, if you read one of them, most likely you won't really like his other works, because they all have that focus, his War trilogy and his rather obscure Atterbomb Blues to end the PDA range. They all feature the concepts of like war, dystopian, bleak storytelling with political undertones. That's pretty much all his work when it comes to the War trilogy and his obscure PDA too. If you don't like one book, probably aren't going to like any of his work. Adding on to that as well, very sadistic characters too, so again, not really to everyone's tastes. Kind of like the same ballpark of The Man in the Velvet Mask, which was controversial, of just having the same themes as this book too. As well, stuff like child abuse, sexual abuse, very unnerving depictions of violence as well, so yeah, it won't gel with everyone. And the other biggest complaint people have with it is in fact the pacing. Let's find out if that's true for me. But before we get into the review, we need to open the doorway to Andrew Cartmel and who he's all about in terms of Doctor Who. This is where we need to talk about the Cartmel master plan. Now, what was the Cartmel master plan and what did it mean? Besides it being a fan-built phenomenon, it was nothing more than a rough draft of a vision where Cartmel wanted to take the Doctor as a character, reintroducing ambiguity and build on the development where we see in An Earthly Child the Doctor references he himself and Susan left Gallifrey and the Time Lords due to some unexplained reason and can never return. Andrew Cartmel, along with Ben Aranovich and Mark Platt, the writer of Lumbarrow, had a rough plan of this new direction of Doctor Who, but never made it to light, and much of the content was in fact in Ghostlight. The foreshadowing was in fact removed, and it was not used in the TV serial. It was never expanded upon besides a few discussions, as the three writers had different ideas and directions for the Doctor's origins. A few plot points detailed, for example, was the Other, one of the original founders of the Time Lord Society, and the connections with the Doctor, who perfected time travel, cut out the drafts of Ghostlight. And that is the extent the Cartmel master plan was implemented in the Virgin New Adventures, where Cartmel and a handful of writers contributed to building, teasing and exploring the mysteries of the Doctor's origins and the darker aspects of the character, until the final novel, Long Barrow, to finally understand why the Doctor left Gallifrey. This was even established in Time Worm by making subtle nods of a more darker direction of the Doctor, and him referencing how evil and corruption runs rampant in the Time Lord Society, which is the reasons why he is the way he is and the way he was brought up, which he says in Time Worm Exodus. Who makes the comparison that the Nazis were simply toddlers compared to the Time Lords in evil. Ideas of the Cartmel master plan with Cartmel himself, Mark Platt and Ben Aranovich were nothing more than table discussions sent to Peter Darvell Evans, the editor of the Virgin books, to build on this idea and incorporate it into the New Adventures. The original plan, season 27, would have introduced Mark Platt with Ice Time featuring the Ice Warriors, and would have resulted in Ace being trained to be a Time Lord under the Doctor's wing, and guidelines to assist the reshaping of Gallifreyan politics and policies and safeguarding. The final story of season 27 and end of the 7th Doctor's run would have been a 3-part story called Elixion, where Andrew Cartmel envisions the regeneration of the 7th Doctor into the 8th incarnation of the Doctor in a confinement cell, though history played a very different path from the original direction. Now back to the discussion of Warhead. Bleak settings and techno-thriller really is my cup of tea. The first book I actually reviewed on the channel was in fact Transit by Ben Aranovich. Techno-thriller, dystopian, and when I first read it, I'll be honest, I didn't really like it. But then again, that was coming close to 10 years ago. So things can certainly change, and it'd be kind of silly to just go off that. So will Warhead be a worthy addition to the Virgin New Adventures? Or will my hope be relied on Witchmark? Yeah. Let's review Warhead by Andrew Cartmel. Warhead is set in a period of Earth all too familiar to real life. Industrial development has accelerated exponentially, waging war as a business to drive money and profit for the benefit of a select few of the most powerful entities on Earth. The development of new technology and weapons of mass destruction, which is only leaving the planet to rot. High amounts of pollution, waste, and guerrilla warfare of rival factions fight on the bottom of the cities and roads, while the techno-fascists and corporations watch the carnage from their towers, not caring about their actions that they've pushed this tribal warfare upon society, and benefiting from the division that's happening from all over the world, be it London, Turkey, and New York. The evil and corrupt corporate establishment known as Butler Institute have their own plans to unite the all-powerful, not to save mankind, but give themselves immortality in a poisoned world. From the prologue scene, it's established that the Doctor is about to stage and lead a revolution to overthrow the ones that are exploiting and creating division to their own benefit. So the plot is kind of my bread and butter of being a dystopian that hits very close to home by adding some sci-fi elements in there too. However, Warhead and the entire War trilogy have a point of contention, and again, it doesn't feel like Doctor Who, as I said in the beginning of the video. People and fans of the New Adventures would describe the range as dark, bleak, edgy in terms of its tones, and this one more so than all the books so far I've read in the Virgin New Adventures. It's the one that fits the description the most of all the words I explained the Virgin New Adventures are. This one is at the highest mark when it comes to that. It has a very strong focus on political storytelling, sadism and all that stuff, so yeah, it is not for everybody. I'm gonna definitely say that straight away. If you do not like it, yep, I understand why. The first chapter is very interesting. It does well to capture the bleak and depressing atmosphere, but the Doctor and his game, what he's up to, is rather up in the air. The cover art really does describe the book very well. Ace is kind of in like the forefront in parts of the book, and the Doctor is like kind of in the shadows, especially when he's looking at the question mark on the wall graffitied on. Very good cover art, which symbolizes the book very well. We also have a character from Survival featured in this book too, Srila, and a character Ace knew from her time at St. Benedict's School around 8 years old, as detailed in Time Room Revelation. It seems Srila doesn't have trust and is unsure about the Doctor, and is debating in her head who really is the enemy. She's reluctant about Butler Institute, but also the Doctor too. Something about the Doctor's nature of being ambiguous makes her nervous. The Doctor's role in this and what he's up to in saying that he sent Ace off for something important seems like Warhead is going to be one of those novels where we're getting super close, where their relationship does in fact fracture and fall. Of course referencing Nightshade and Love and War. Playing chess and not being the king of the chessboard, but representing the hand, the player. So the setup is in fact intriguing. What the Doctor's role is and what he might do. It leaves the reader in suspense and also pretty concerned. Away from London and now in New York City, business executive and head of Butler Institute, the organisation building new technologies, which we will soon get into, Matthew Ohara. From the beginning, he seems like a man who loves his family. When his wife and child are asleep, it's when he does his work engineering specific types of hardware, software. A character called Pegram, who relies on an oxygen pump system to survive, is one of the few individuals to ask Ohara on his progress towards these newfound technologies to preserve human life from the growing toxic pollution killing people and away from the violence and despair. So it seems Ohara and the Butler Institute are concerned about saving people, but more so the oligarchs and the ultra powerful. Ohara, he doesn't strike to me as just this typical bad guy corporate figurehead character. He certainly isn't. He's a little bit more multifaceted, a multi-dimensional character, like Tobias Vaughan, who had a very calm demeanour, also very charismatic and charming, but deep down he was evil. Ohara, on the other time, he reminds me of a Tobias Vaughan character. But when it comes to the word evil, because it's such a strong word, it's difficult to put that characterization onto Ohara. But I would describe Ohara as this. He thinks things need to be worse before they get better. So he kind of sounds like a politician, doesn't he? But I do not want to reveal like the inner thoughts and the motivations of Ohara, because I think he's a flipping good character. Really, really good. Very well written. He does things which it makes you question him a lot. He's doing things for behind the scenes in secrecy anyway. But I'm not going to reveal any more. I think I'm just going to leave it quiet for Ohara. We can really visualize how the pollution is poisoning and killing people, with Srila with an autoimmune disease and a character named Maria who meets the Doctor in the Kane building and befriends her, who is sick and is a dying housekeeper who will commit her last effort to act against the company that both employed her and poisoned her. While this is all happening, the cat is around the Doctor, and when it takes the corner, the Doctor follows and warns Maria not to follow, referencing Floor 51, insinuated as something Maria doesn't need to know. So in my review of Time's Crucible, I had a theory, and again I don't know because I haven't read all the Cat's Cradle books. This is just me making a theory, not a fact. I was thinking that the cat was some type of guide for the Doctor. Not exactly malicious, but in fact a guide. Even though in some scenes of Time's Crucible it did convey that it was malicious, but it wasn't my guess. But in Warhead, again, it's just, oh dear. This is the problem. Peter Darville Evans only went forward with Cat's Cradle because he liked the name Cat's Cradle. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so cool name. I love the name Cat's Cradle. It sounds fitting for the 7th Doctor era, even though it was in fact a draft and an idea for the 6th Doctor era. But it was done so last minute. It's like Andrew Cartmel, and I know Andrew Hunt as well, just had to just think of something, because there was just no planning compared to Time Worm, which at least had a structure and an idea what to do from start to finish. With Cat's Cradle, there isn't. There's none of that. In fact, there was no very, very little referencing about a cat in this book. Even though, in fact, Ace is holding the cat, it's very insignificant. And that is not great, considering it's called Cat's Cradle Warhead. And funny enough, I had that problem with Time Worm as well. That the Time Worm didn't have too much involved in the 2nd and 3rd book. Time Worm Genesis makes sense because it had quite a big role. In Exodus, hardly, not a lot at all. So I just call it Exodus. And the same with Apocalypse too. The Time Worm Revelation makes sense, but it feels like Mark Platt laid the structure down, who had the best idea in his head what Cat's Cradle would be about, but Andrew Cartmel and Andrew Hunt were just in the dark and go, well, I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to have to wing it. And yet that's pretty much what it is. And there's so much things about the cat which are just, I'm not going to say left unresolved, because I haven't read the final book. Now, what about this infamous Butler Institute? It's referenced quite a few times about their involvement and how they're responsible for certain events brought up in other Doctor Who books and stories. Butler Institute is a corporation founded by the man Matthew Ohara in the 21st century, and their headquarters in New York City, but had buildings and complexes around the world. They were secretly researching techniques for transferring human consciousness into computer systems as a means to avoid the deterioration of the world, be it climate change, pollution, industrial development, societal collapse of the world, and only really for the elite ruling class, at least initially, while everybody beneath was simply not of any importance. But their corporate system too was also terrible, as it doesn't mean you were automatically safe if you worked for Butler Institute. They had departments which had their levels of importance, from the biozone to the social zone. In fact, many of the hard workers were left as victims, and many people who were employed by Butler Institute, like Maria, were also poisoned by them. We learn over the course of the book, which I will reveal some of it, like innocent and hard-serving police officers who were shot and killed by Butler Institute operatives. And it seems that bodies of the dead who were shot and killed during this conflict around the world are collected and taken to the King's Building, which is the Butler Institute building in London, while this leaves the detectives to pick up the pieces and solve what just happened and why. So in fact, yeah, Butler Institute are indeed stealing people's bodies who have been killed, either by the operatives or anyone who they find. And the reason why is pretty damn disturbing, I cannot lie. And in fact, this references back to O'Hara's whole point, that he says things have to be worse before they get better. And it's in connection to also harvesting bodies, dead bodies. It's really fucked up, it is, and I would never expect it from a TV series, and of course I'm not gonna spoil it, but damn, it's bad. Not bad as in bad, but bad as in holy shit, you gotta be messed up in the head to go forward with that, even for the greater good. But a lot of what this book sets up, the word I would use is, especially for the Doctor, very bizarre. Especially with the Doctor's actions. We get that when we first introduced to a character called Bobby Prescott. Bobby was attacked and swarmed by violent thugs, teenagers basically, and how this whole scene echoes out to me is just like full on like sadism and stuff like that. Everyone is either a sadist who has pleasure in harming others, and Bobby, who is a victim of being stabbed by these teenagers, isn't really an innocent person either. He's in fact a serial killer, and he in fact enjoys pain being inflicted onto him. And yeah, Bobby Prescott operated in the American city, and during this time many anti-book protests and riots took place. And this in fact references popular literature like Fahrenheit 451, a dystopian about the importance of information and how we are doomed to repeat history in dystopian societies by totalitarian regimes, by blocking and burning information that is deemed against the narrative of the system. Bobby seemed to have a deep hatred of, in fact, young people, how society has deviated, and who take their time just wasting their lives through playing video games and deliberately just target them. But he can't really say anything. He's in fact a serial killer. But he finds that the motivations of killing and targeting these youngsters is he has a reason to. So he is just as messed up in the head as everyone else. And in fact, pretty much everyone in this book is. Either they are serial killers, or they're mentally unwell, like Justine, who we will get to. It's a really, really damn bleak book, and the prose, it's very accessible by Cartmel. But I get the understanding why it's not for everybody, because in ways it does feel like a Doctor Who novel, but for me, I never really have that problem. I know what I was getting through this book, and it was a dark, dystopian techno-thriller, and that's exactly what it is. But yeah, that's Bobby for you. And going back to my point with the Doctor's actions being bizarre, the Doctor, who has a code name as the Little Man, is commanding the teenagers to attack. Why? Am I missing something here? Really odd, the 7th Doctor, and I'm just understanding why would he hire teenagers from these tribal guerrilla warfare gangs. It's a really, really bizarre setup for the 7th Doctor, and I was bewildered. Absolutely bewildered. It's a very similar approach to Time's Crucible, but in Time's Crucible, it was such an awesome mystery. In this, it's just bizarre. And after that, where I thought the book was pretty bizarre, I actually took a month break from it. Because I was thinking, yeah, I don't know what to think about it. And I'm glad I did, because I certainly needed it. Because I think if I was forcing myself to read the book, it will probably give me not the correct rating and feeling. Because if you're not feeling reading a book, then you shouldn't force it, because I'm going to give it the wrong rating, which is not what a reviewer is supposed to do when we talk about these books. So yeah, I took a month break from it. Going back to what I love about the book wasn't just about tribes of Gans fighting each other in a anti-book dystopian society and Gans acting like tribalistic thugs causing chaos. But people ended up dead because of spreading certain types of information within books, knowledge, ideals, beliefs, that causes ideological conflicts. And that being the factor of the violence also speaks volumes in the world right now. So this book does lean similar to popular dystopian novels, more so like Fahrenheit and the importance of books. That's what I love about it. And it doesn't try to rip off Fahrenheit or anything like that. It shares some of the ideas of the book, certainly, but has its own twist on it. So I do get why some say it doesn't feel like Doctor Who. That piece of criticism doesn't apply to me. I don't think that. And the characters, you just don't like them. And they aren't here to be liked. Some of them are sympathetic for. Some of them are just downright disturbing, messed up in the head. If you think about it, they're pretty much just all victims to the whole world that's just been infested with pollution and violence is just spreading like a plague. And that is what I find so captivating about this book by Cartmel. He absolutely freaking nailed that. Taking a break from it, where the Seventh Doctor's direction was really bizarre, it was the right call, because it did in fact give me a very positive look on the book, I would say. If I forced through it, I probably would have gave it a lot worse of a rating. But I in fact didn't. What I found interesting about this book is Cartmel's future dystopian predictions of the world with technology. A part of the book comments that a ferret wasn't something created by artificial intelligence, but purchased on the grey market, and a synthetic construct, which if you look at the present day, which behind the scenes AI and robotics is 10 years ahead of what it's perceived in the public eye, it's a scary concept. But a ferret that looked and acted like one, but had the ability to perform computer commands, hack into software and mainframes for data collection, scary thought. So you will be walking around being observed by perhaps crows or even damn pigeons on the road, and you wouldn't have a clue. It's actually a synthetic construct that's collecting data about you and remotely hacking into your private networks. It's a small little detail of the book about breach of privacy. Seriously makes you think. But yeah, this ferret construct was acting for a character named Stephanie, an employee of Butler Institute, but very much an insider trying to gather information related to the Institute, but was caught by the rather creepy man called Mway, a high-ranking figure at Butler Institute, and almost second in command to Ohara, being the top man, obviously. And Stephanie would eventually face him. But Mway actually made a pretty good point, suggesting stealing from Butler Institute secret files is like stealing from someone else's bank account. It doesn't belong to you. But the problem with Butler Institute is their insidious plans that directly affects the world. So in fact, Mway is just being extremely manipulative. And whatever evil they commit is simply no one's business but their own. So it's privacy for Butler Institute, but not for everyone else. They are in fact hypocrites. Mway acts pretty sinister when confronting Stephanie, acts very calm in his demeanour, just drinking coffee and smiling, with a gun on the table. He acts normal, but in reality he's playing mind games with Stephanie, which no doubt puts her on her edge. She's thinking at any moment she could have a bullet in her head in a split second, but eventually his smile goes away, and his very cold and neutral stare is chilling beyond belief. Who is completely loyal to the company with the plans of Butler Institute. But Stephanie and Mway are actually two sides of the same coin, because they found out about the secrets of Butler Institute the exact same way, by hacking into the system. So Mway is definitely tested her. And yeah, chapter 6 is what reveals the plan involving Butler Institute. Ohara reveals the project to Stephanie after being exposed into hacking the system, which Ohara admires. He's still cautious about loyalty. But the more you go through this novel, the more you either going to like it or not like it. The Doctor's actions are again still a mystery, and Ace in chapter 6 is still in the background, with her name only being mentioned or written in some way, which I guess does add some suspense to the novel. But yeah, I do admit it does take some time to get going. As well, within the middle portion, just getting to like the second part of the book, this book is divided in two parts, or two episodes, depending on how you look at it. And like part 2 is only like something like 60 pages or something like that, so it's like really at the end. But yeah, pacing is definitely its biggest downfall, because I was enjoying its themes, I was enjoying its concepts, I love the prose, but flipping hell, sometimes it took time to actually just drive the story. It was constantly at a good level for me, and that's about it. It didn't go like up like that, shoot up like that. It didn't really go down for me either. It just stayed just above neutral. Because even though it's so brilliant in some places, it falls flat in so many others too. Funny, ironic, as I said the exact same thing with Time's Crucible. It's just again with the title Cat's Cradle. It just doesn't do it for me. It doesn't feel like it's a part of a trilogy. In fact, it is. It's part of the War trilogy. It doesn't feel like it's a part of the Cat's Cradle trilogy. It just doesn't. But yeah, Ace makes her appearance just shy of 100 pages in, and it's established behind the scenes that the Doctor and Ace have set up some resistance movement to counter Butler Institute. Seeing Ace in these situations where she has to lead people who are pretty questionable, like thugs, gangs and mercenaries who might not take very well to be led by a woman, adds some excellent character moments for Ace. She herself has to sell herself as a strong and assertive character, not be pushed around by these people if she's to be successful. Kind of hints of the novel Deceit, post Love and War for Ace. Despite being rather controversial with its fans, not many people actually like the direction Ace takes after Love and War, but we'll get to that when it's in Deceit. Ace, as the cover suggests, is the star of the novel in my opinion. She alone, like Time's Crucible, only left with instructions from the Doctor, which leaves Ace alone with mercenaries like Masood to go to Turkey, which is linked to various weaponry, power and energy required. Feels very authentic and real. Masood is purposefully playing the dangerous one to test Ace and her strength. Ace uses her revolver to use that as authority, but Masood is in no stretch of the imagination intimidated by Ace at all. It's Ace is the one who's hesitating, even though she has the gun in her hands. That is 100% a highlight for me in this book because it feels so damn real. It doesn't feel fake, it doesn't feel forced, it's not stupid writing. It just feels so great because Masood, he's just he's like a light switch. He can either go off or on, and that switch can flick in a split second, and Ace has to be on guard. It just feels so damn real, that scene. Superb writing by Andrew Cartmel. It strikes the reader as someone who would be foolish to try to intimidate, because he's clearly lived a life of chaos and violence throughout his entire life and has been battle hardened because of it. Warhead is very clearly foreshadowing Deceit in this novel, Peter Darville Evans' contribution to the Virgin New Adventures, and forged by her surroundings into something more. Splendid foreshadowing. So this rivalry Masood has as part of the Turkish mercenaries, despite being hired by Ace, he hates her because she did toss a grenade at him. It didn't not detonate, but it actually made him jump, which everybody laughed at him. It kind of bruised his ego, and now has a hatred for Ace. So the strength of the character really shows it. Is it my favourite novel featuring Ace? I think it might be, because she's just splendid in this one. Just feels so real. So thumbs up for Andrew Cartmel for the characterization of Ace, because hit the nail right on the coffin. And I don't think this is really a spoiler because Masood didn't play a particularly a big role, more so just building on development of Ace. Ace had no choice but to in fact kill him, because he was too much of a loose cannon, and he was in fact a terrible human being anyway. Ace does have these conflicts in her head about taking life, even though that Masood wasn't really a particularly nice person. He was messed up in the head, and she doesn't want to associate herself as a killer, which, if you see the direction Deceit, she becomes a battle-hardened soldier. But the scenes in Turkey, besides the plot with surrounding Masood, it was just in fact a lot of padding really. I just really wanted the plot to move along with Butler Institute. It felt like it just went on a massive segue. Just a move completely away from Butler Institute. Too much for me. In fact, I wanted a little bit more from Butler Institute, and we don't really get any more from them until, in fact, if I can find it, it's in fact near the 200 page mark. So yeah, it's a lot of padding, a lot of pacing in this novel, pacing problems. It's one of the biggest complaints people have about the novel. and it's probably my biggest complaint as well. Close to the halfway mark, where the Doctor and Ace unite with each other finally after Ace's part in Turkey all alone, which, as I said, was padded in terms of plots but added good character moments for Ace. Some people might not like that, in terms of just being quite the slog, I gotta admit. It takes a long time to bring the main characters together, and I was unsure where was it even going. So I have to say the third of the book to the halfway mark, actually yeah, I'm going to include the halfway mark too, you might question if you should continue to be committed to reading the book, because it has problems with its pacing and it can feel stagnant for a lot of people. Great character moments, great prose, not denying that. The plot, however, is stuck in limbo. Now back to some characters, and a character I mentioned before was Justine, who is just very much two sides of the same coin compared to Ace. Justine is very radical in terms of her beliefs and her position in the world, and will even resort to violence when it comes to reaching her objectives. So she's a little bit more radical compared to Ace. Ace can be classed as like a fighter, believes in fighting oppression, stuff like that. Justine's exactly the same, but Justine's actions are a little bit more hypocritical, I would say, because she's an environmentalist, but she destroys and burns down like cars and vehicles with stuff like petrol bombs and stuff, which would make her a hypocrite because she's making more pollution within the world. But in fact, when you understand her mental place and her mind, she's in fact mentally ill within the book. A victim of her surroundings, just pretty much like everyone else, just being just messed up in the head mentally. And everyone is just struggling within this dystopian society to find meaning, find purpose, and to even achieve like their radical positions. Everyone's just so radical at the moment. They will resort to violence and terrorist acts as well. So yeah, again, as I said, he nailed the prose and what he wanted to deliver. Just Cartmel nailed it. And I would say, and this is the biggest compliment I'm giving Warhead, this has the strongest prose out of all the books so far. It has the strongest prose. It is nailed to perfection at this. It's just unfortunate. And the characterization too, splendid. So it's unfortunate that the plot, it's just sometimes just stagnant in places. It's its biggest drawback, and it's a massive drawback for me. It really affects the rating for me, because it's just so padded and has pacing problems through most of the book. It's a real shame, otherwise it'd be getting something like a 9 out of 10 for me. But just seeing these people who are basically corrupted to act in irrational ways, I wouldn't really associate those themes with enjoyable reading. There are books which are in the New Adventures, they are still dark and edgy, but this one does take it to a place where some might not enjoy. For me, I actually do enjoy it. For others, probably not. But the second part, which really is the part that wraps up everything, was pretty good. We finally get more on Butler Institute, which is what I wanted, but more with Ohara, his mindset, motivations, and my favourite part of the book was, or one of my favourites rather, was seeing the mind of Ohara. But there's more to the character than that, I'm just simply not revealing it. It was a surprising but welcome addition, and I would say Warhead wraps up pretty darn well. So, to conclude on Cat's Cradle, Warhead by Andrew Cartmel. This was a good book. It had one of the strongest prose in most Doctor Who books I've read. Really, really strong prose. And in terms of the Virgin New Adventures ranking, sorry, not ranking, well, the marathon I'm doing, it definitely has the strongest prose for me. It was just incredible. It's just my cup of tea when it comes to reading books. I just love dystopian books. It's unfortunately let down by pacing problems, which, if I could try and like give you an idea of how bad it is in terms of pacing. I would say something like that. That much is where you would say to yourself, the book is rather stagnant. That much. Yeah, it's his biggest drawback for me. Most of it, I found the Seventh Doctor's actions pretty bizarre, very weird, but I do think it wraps up well there. I was contemplating, especially where I was struggling to read the book, I gave a month break from it, I was wondering, is Time's Crucible really going to be better than Warhead? I was fearing that possibility, because I really did not want that to be true, but it's not true. I think this is a better book than Time's Crucible, and I would read it. Yeah, I think I would read it again. I'm comfortable and happy to say that. I would not read Time's Crucible again. I struggled too much with it. It was a difficult read. Not that it was bad or terrible. It's just that it's just so convoluted, that book. And another problem, just call it that. Just call it Warhead. And I'm gonna say the same thing about Witchmark, because I just know that to be true. That it was just a last... he just liked the name. Peter Darwell, he just liked the name, and there was just no kind of planning or communication of what Cat's Cradle would be on about. It's just a... I'm just gonna call it Warhead. Just gonna call it Warhead because it's the second from the trilogy. I really got nothing out of it when it comes to Cat's Cradle. Nothing at all. I'm gonna give this... Now, I originally wrote down on my script that I gave it 7 out of 10, but I'm going to give it a bit more. I think it's a little too low. I'm going to give it 7.5 out of 10 for Warhead. It's a good novel. I just think it's got too many problems with it for me to push it to an 8. Just 0.5. 0.5 more. So I think 7's a little too low, but I think 8 is too high. So it's a book that's kind of all over the place, but I like it more than I dislike it. And yeah, that is Warhead by Andrew Cartmel. So yeah, it did turn out well for me, but now we got this, and to be honest, I just want to get to Nightshade. If I'm honest, I just want to get to Nightshade. But yeah, we're gonna have to get through this one first, and it worries me because Andrew Hunt did regret this going into publication. I'm not really sure the reasons why. Maybe because he wanted to make changes to it, but he didn't get time to do, or that he just thought it wasn't ready and he had to do it because of a deadline. I don't know. I don't really know the reasons why. He's kind of an enigma, Andrew Hunt. I don't really know too much about him besides him doing charity book works. That's about it. So he's kind of an enigma to me. But I know he focused more on fantasy. Perhaps be a bit different. Well, something positive. I love the cover. But we just have to wait and see. So, no Nightshade yet. Even though I want to get to it. See you for Witchmark.